Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. Click subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, basically wherever podcatcher or listening channel you choose to listen to podcasts at, you can find us. You can also find us at www.patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. There you will get Q&A excerpts from Dragon Con Film Festival, short film reviews, and coming up in early 2026, you will get the Oscars as well. This is going to be an interesting conversation. I'm really glad that my guest today agreed to have this, because this is a conversation that I've wanted to have for a while, and it's not just about a particular movie that had a profound impact on me and the direction of my life, but and still does. I mean, still it still has a hold on me. I want this conversation to be also about how we how we look back at art and filmmakers that we admired that maybe have fallen off of that pedestal to a certain extent, that we might have put them on earlier in life. And before we introduce my guest, I do want to start with a bit of a story about this. This is a movie that came out in May of 1995. It was the second directorial effort from this actor, who in a few years had quickly become one of my mother's absolute favorite actors, and she would go see his movies several times in theaters, whether it was a movie like Forever Young, whether it was his first directorial feature, Man Without Face, whether it was Maverick, or whether it was this one. She saw this an obscene amount of times. Like, even I can't even say that I've seen a movie this amount of times, that amount of times in theaters. We actually had the pleasure of watching this a couple weeks before it started. She was in Women in Film because she was trying to do acting in Georgia, and she got advance tickets to a screening of this at the Terra in downtown Atlanta. And we came out of it. We had a lot of thoughts about it, and I wasn't even it almost seemed, it's funny because it almost seemed like I enjoyed it more than she did when in that first discussion. Um but that was also the time that they were doing PR for, or the press launch for the movie in Atlanta, and the director and star of this film, Mel Gibson, was doing an interview the next morning on 99X, which was the 90s alternative rock uh, station in Atlanta. And my mom basically took off work so she could listen to it. And she actually got in to ask to talk to Mel Gibson, which was a huge thrill for her. And unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that interview. Otherwise, I would have loved to have shared this in this podcast. But needless to say, it was a dream come true for her, and it was absolutely one of the highlights of her life at that time, and as a movie lover. And the movie we are talking about is Mel Gibson's 1995 film Braveheart, which won the Best Picture for that year, as well as Best Director for Gibson. And and has also had a profound impact on me in the direction of my life, which we will get to. But first, I do want to go ahead and announce my guest. My guest is a return guest. His podcast, The Movie Lose, currently on hiatus, but that is bound to happen at times when life gets in the way. I mean, we had 2 month hiatus here at Sonic Cinema um, earlier in the summer, so I certainly understand that. But it's always great to talk to my guest. I think the last time we had you on, we talked about the game. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, Please welcome back to the podcast, Carlo from the Movie Loop podcast. Carlo, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me again.
So, I have already laid down the groundwork for my experiences with Braveheart. What were your experiences with the movie?
Well, I didn't see it in theaters, but it's a movie that obviously was in the zeitgeist and people were talking about it. So I think as soon as it hit video, I rented it back in 1995, 1996. I loved it the first time I saw it. I bought it on VHS, and maybe people can't see it, but I have my VHS dual copy here, still
Oh my
alive.
God. It's a blast from the past.
Yep. I think I also own it on DVD. I'm pretty sure I have it on DVD. I upgraded it. So I've seen it a lot of times. It's one of those films that I used to watch often, even if it was on TV. I owned it, but even if it was on TV and I was channel surfing and it was on, I well, okay, let me just watch what's left or parts of it, because I find it and I don't want to jump that much ahead, but I find it to be a pretty great spectacle of of
Yeah,
of, of cinema.
yeah.
And so it's one I enjoy a lot.
hmm No, I mean, I agree with that assessment completely. And I mean, I think that is the best way to look at it now, 30 years out, is just really exceptional spectacle
Yeah.
in Cinemax spectacle. And I mean, I know the film is largely derided for its historical accuracy. And certainly the fact that Mel Gibson, who plays William Wallace, the main character in the movie, is shorter than Wallace was in real life. That doesn't necessarily help. He's also an Australian American who, has to try to do a Scottish accent, which, you know, is always kind of a problematic thing, but I think he mostly pulls it off fairly well. Um, so I will say for me personally, like I talked about my mother's experience, and so the number of time, like I said, the amount of time she saw this movie in theaters, and a lot of Mel Gibson movies in theaters around this time, was downright obscene. Like she saw this, I mean, she was off for summer vacation, so she just basically saw it as much as she could. She saw it like 24 times.
Wow.
I saw it 5 times, and that was kind of middle of the road for me, like 5 times seeing it. I was just starting to get into. I mean, I had high school still. I was in marching band and all that stuff, so it's not as easy for. It wasn't as easy for me to get to the theater as many times as she was, but um no, the thing that the reason this is, and we'll talk about Gibson, we'll talk about the controversies around the film, we'll talk about Gibson's controversies, because that is an essential part of talking about, I think, Mel Gibson in general.
Yeah.
You have to really reckon with the controversies of who he is now and who he kind of revealed himself to be over the past couple of decades. Um, the reason that this movie will always be a favorite of mine, apart from just being fantastic spectacle, like Carlos said, is the score by the late great James Horner.
Yeah.
Um, This was at a time where I was really starting to dive in headfirst into film soundtracks. And the previous year, we talked about last year with the Crow. I've talked about it a lot with regards to Crow. That was one that kind of put into my head the idea of film music is this alternative art form of music that was wholly unique in its own respects and also fascinating in its own respects. Braveheart is James Horner's score for Braveheart is the one that inspired me to want to pursue film music in my own right. Um, and it still is one of my absolute favorite scores. I never tire of listening to it. I this is you brought out the double disc or the double tape VHS, which we had both the full frame. So we had, because remember, you had pan and scan, and then
Yeah.
you had widescreen for VHS. And
Yeah.
I think that's the pan and scan, which it's like, it's funny, you when you watch a movie on widescreen for the first time, you don't really it startles you almost how much pan and scan is
Yeah.
cutting out. But no,
This film has been modified from its original
yeah.
version.
So it's the pan and scan version.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've had, we had pan scan widescreen VHS. Uh I did get DVD when it came out with Gibson's commentary. I eventually upgraded to Blu-ray, which eventually led me to getting 4K. And the soundtrack is one that I bought multiple times as well. I bought on cassette tape and then of course CD, and I still have that original CD that I bought. And but there was something about this score and the depth of this score. And I noticed it this last time watching it. This music really carries the film's emotions in a truly profound way that goes with some of the best film music I think that's ever been written. And I look, I love Titanic. I love Horner's score for Titanic. I'm glad won him the Oscar. I will always have more of a hot soft spot for Braveheart over Titanic. Um, that may be sacrilege to a lot of people, but you know what? It is what it is. And the fact that he had this and Apollo 13 in the same year, and both of those
Wow.
scores are
Yeah.
absolutely amazing and wholly unique in their own ways, was just really a remarkable thing to experience that summer. Um, what are what what are your thoughts about James Horner in particular, or in this score in general?
Well, I've never been much of a score guy or that kind of knows, composers a lot and but yeah, but I would agree that yeah, this is one that you can feel how the score is leading you to certain beats of the movie, certain emotions and rousing in one moment, dramatic in others. So yeah, there's that a drive, there's that force behind the score that I would agree. Um, I was looking because I just, like I said, I'm not a very score oriented guy, but I was looking at his at the films that he composed, and yeah, you mentioned Apollo 13, which is a very, it's very telling how, like you said, same year, and it's two completely unique and different scores, what instrumentations you use, what how you play to certain things. There's a lot of horns here, there's a lot of certain Celtic instruments, and obviously in this one, you mentioned Titanic, which is a another iconic score. So yeah, definitely it's one that, with that caveat that I'm not a very score oriented guy, if I would listen to it, I would probably recognize it and say, yeah, that
Mhm.
that's a Braveheart score.
And the thing is, it's like one of the things that Horner kind of got knocked on while he was alive is the fact that he would there are motifs, there are instrumentations that would come back time and time again when it comes to his scores. I mean, obviously, this has a lot in common with Titanic, but you could also say has a lot in common with Patriot Games, which he did earlier, which is has some other Celtic elements and stuff like that as well for that Jack Ryan thriller. He did Aliens and Avatar for Cameron as well, and there's commonalities in those scores
Yeah.
as well as he did Star Trek 2 and 3, and you can hear some similarities in his work there. So, I mean, he definitely, I think even more so than Goldsmith and Williams, he probably got bad rap for that, I think, just because of the fact that I do think his best scores are up there with the best of like Goldsmith and Williams. I mean, you could also talk about Mask of Zorro. You could also talk about A Beautiful Mind. You could also talk about Cocoon, another great one they did for Ron Howard. He just had, and I mean, even with Mel Gibson, I mean, he did great work with in Apocalypto and then
Oh yeah.
Man Without Face earlier in this, and he's just a composer. He was a composer who, I think, there I don't know, would I put him in my top five? I think he would still be in my top five now as far as favorite film composers. I mean, it even though we're now 10 years past his passing,
Yeah.
I think I would still put him up there in my top five, just on the basis of the ones that I listed. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, you know, thinking about it, and especially rewatching Braveheart for this, listening to the score within the context of the movie, made me miss him all over again. And it
Yeah.
really does, and like you said, you go between the spectacle of the action, you go between the romance, you go between more dramatic moments and suspenseful moments, and it's just there's something about the emotions that he's able to elicit in this that is just on another level for me with other scores that he's done.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You mentioned a couple that I just didn't remember that he had done, like Aliens, and that's one that you mentioned it, and yeah, I got that bum, 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 from the military scenes with the Marines and all that, and I got, yeah, that's notable, and it's things that you remember.
Yeah, and so let's get into the movie in general. This was a screenplay by Randall Wallace, who was in Scotland and had heard about William Wallace and heard about the story of William Wallace and thought, well, that would make a pretty interesting movie. So he wrote the screenplay. Gibson originally was interested in directing it, but not necessarily starring in it, because by this point he really had the directing bug after Man Without Face, and he didn't like the idea of having to star in it. But that was the only way Paramount was going to put up the money is if he starred in it. So he stars as William Wallace, and I mentioned that a lot of people knock this movie for being completely historically inaccurate, and there's definitely a lot of things that
Yeah.
strain historical credibility in this. I mean, first of all, we have the a recreation of the Battle of Stirling, better known as the Battle of Stirling Bridge, but there's not bridge
No
anywhere
bridge.
whatsoever um, on the battlefield. But the one of the notes that I put is I was taking notes for this one is it's awful history, but it's great myth making.
Yeah.
And I think in film in particular, because obviously there's only so much that I think you can do with 3.5 hours to tell the breadth of a story. I mean, I think there are filmmakers who've done exceptional jobs of it with broad subjects like, say, Amadeus or Lawrence of Arabia. But I don't. But I think the thing that I think Gibson gets here that is a great credit to him as a filmmaker is that this is a larger than life character.
Yeah.
This is a character that he has two things on his mind. He has the love that was taken from him and the idea of freedom that he's fighting for. And I think in that he was able to realize that, you know what, this is gonna be a great yarn. This is gonna be a great yarn. So let me see what I can do. And
Yeah.
I mean, he by this point he had worked with Richard Donner, he had worked with George Miller in the Mad Max film, so he had worked with filmmakers very adept in action. And one of the things that is so extraordinary about this film really is a an inflection point between how battle scenes were
Oh yeah.
filmed before this and how battle scenes would be filmed after this. I
Yeah.
don't know if you don't have this bridge, what do the battle scenes in Saving Private Ryan look like? What do the battle scenes in Lord of the Rings look like? What do all of those battle scenes look like? And it's just really striking. I mean, he obviously has his own influences. I mean, people brought up Orson Welles' Chimes of Midnight, and obviously Kurosawa. Um, but the fact of the matter is, this is taking battle scenes in historical epics to a level in Hollywood that we had never really seen at this point.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Um, but going back to the historical accuracy point, one of the things that this is my line of thought with this, but when I first saw it, I didn't know anything about Scottish history or who was William Wallace. I just said, oh,
Mm-hmm.
a Mel Gibson movie. Of course, I'm going to watch it. Um, so I'm a naturally curious person. So whenever I find things that I'm curious about, I'm gonna dig and I'm gonna find out about that. So as soon as I finish it, I said, okay, so who was this man? Who was William Wallace? What was going on with Scotland? And I remember I was looking at for stuff about that. So if we need to realize that this is a movie. This is not a documentary. You want to know about
Yeah.
the real William Wallace? Find a documentary or read a book. Um, so this is a movie. So it's done with the purpose of entertainment. But one of the things that it did was that it led me to find out about the real William Wallace, about the Scottish fight for independence, and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that we need to remember is that the film is based and inspired in a poem, in an epic poem that
Mm-hmm.
is called "The Acts and Deeds of the Illustrious and Valiant Champion Sir William Wallace," which is a poem that was written. It was a long time after William Wallace's death, um, and it's a poem that it's what was written to obviously elevate and exalt all the exploits of William Wallace, like a heroic, like you said, larger than life figure, the kind of things that you would think that are passed down from generation to generation.
Yes.
Remember William Wallace. Remember William Wallace. And I think that that's the kind of vibe that you have to to know that's in the film. And even Mel Gibson even does it at several points in the film when he like gives you that idea. This is a that kind of character and that kind of epic. For example, when they're preparing for war, and one of the people in the one of the Scottish guys said, "William Wallace is 7 feet tall,"
Yeah.
because that's that kind of legend. And there's that scene which I think is very key for for you to get in the right frame of mind and not start, oh, that there wasn't a bridge there, or there was a um there's a scene towards the end. I think it's when you head into the last act, where you see Gibson shows you village people talking about William Wallace.
Yeah.
The William Wallace, blah blah blah. And at the same time, you're seeing these breathtaking images of William Wallace running through mountains and standing on top of a
Hmm.
mountain with the wind on the hair and on his hair and all that. And it's a very heroic portrayal and gallant, and it gives you that idea. This is not necessarily accurate, but we're going for that heroic vibe. And I
Yeah.
think you have to
Yeah.
be in that frame of mind for the film to work. And don't get bogged down by uh all the historical inaccuracies, that there are a lot of historical
Yeah.
inaccuracies.
No, I think the fact that you touch on perfectly the fact that it is based on an epic poem,
Yeah,
one of those that will been and basically will passed on, to your point, passed on from generation to generation. And at some point somebody decide, okay, this needs to be written down so we can preserve it. But it's ultimately a poem that is designed to be spoken, and that is going to be the way that this story lives on. And I think that is absolute. I think the fact of the matter is that is, I think Gibson realizes that. And regardless of whether you think he's a particularly great storyteller, great filmmaker, he recognizes the greatness in this story, and he recognizes the importance of this story. And it's funny because of the fact that there was a lot of years in the 90s where we got like sort of dueling common movies where it's like common elements. Like it was mostly in disaster films. Like you had Dante's Peak and Inferno a couple of months apart,
volcano.
Deep Impact and Armageddon.
Yeah,
In 1995, it was dueling Scottish freedom fighter movies because we had this and we also had Rob
Rob
Roy,
Roy. Yeah,
which Liam Neeson was in and Tim Roth was nominated for an Oscar for. And, I mean, Rob Roy, apparently, I'll admit I still have not seen it, but I've heard very good things about it.
yeah, it's pretty good.
It's just one of those things that I will get to it at some point, but I just haven't had a chance to see it. It did not do as well as Braveheart, and obviously Braveheart has the cachet of being a Mel Gibson film, who at the time was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood.
Yeah,
Um, whether that should have been the case or not, it was the case. I mean, he had the Lethal Weapon movies, he had the Mad Max movies, he had done Maverick the previous year, he had started to get into directing. He had done Hamlet by this point. He had done Tequila Sunrise, which was my mother's favorite movie of his. Um, and so he was on a run here, and and it's funny because the next year he collaborates with Ron Howard in Ransom, and like they
yeah.
were their movies had been up for the Oscars the previous year. So it's really so it was really interesting, that particular trajectory of Gibson's career. And the fact of the matter is, he essentially cashed every chip he could on this project at that point to get this project made. And $50 million is not a lot, but for somebody who was directing their second feature, who was not really known for historical epics and was more known for contemporary action movies, contemporary movies, this was a risk. And
Yeah.
let's face it, the success of this movie led him to be a truly independent filmmaker with his next two films as a director. So, um, no, I one of the things I love about there are so many things I love about this movie. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm most impressed with this movie, one of the things I admire about Gibson, especially in his first two films with Man Without Face and Braveheart, is the depth of the cast.
Oh yeah.
Like he makes room for supporting characters in a way that a lot of actors slash directors didn't necessarily at that time. And you the cast it was what was most remarkable for me watching this movie is realizing how many people whose careers I would find myself intersecting with over time. I mean, even now, like you have Brian Cox as Uncle Argo, Brandon
Yeah.
Gleeson, who's in as many historical epics as could possibly
Yeah.
be done. James Cosmo, who was on The Walking Dead for years and Game of Thrones, and Angus McFadden, who plays Robert the Bruce, Catherine McCormick. She didn't really have the career you would think she would have had it after this, but and then you have Sophie Merceau, who is still working and still doing very
Yeah.
good work. And then 4 years after this, she was a Bond girl, and granted, arguably one of the lesser Bond movies, but still, like she was, this put
Yeah.
her on a larger map than we were used to at that time. And then you've got Patrick McGowan as Longshanks.
Yeah, it's definitely a great cast, and like I said, you get Tommy Flanagan, the guy with the face scar, who I love and
Yeah.
watch in every in a lot of films and TV shows. He's one of those favorite that guy actor.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Like him in Sons of Anarchy. Yeah. I mean, I that was great seeing him on that
yeah,
show for all those years.
I haven't seen Sons of Anarchy, but he was in 24, which I've seen, and many other films. But yeah, you mentioned um, Patrick McGoohan, and I think he really sinks his teeth into this role, and he's so evil and despicable. He's definitely one of my favorite mustache twirling villains. I love
Yeah.
him. It's one of those that you love, you hate him, but it's because
Hmm.
he's so perfectly acted. It's
No,
great.
the thing I love about the thing I love to hate about Longshanks is the way McGowan plays him as, to your point, the mustache twirling villain. Like there's an over the top aspect to his villainy in this movie, even when he's silent near the end, when he's lost the ability to speak, that is just absolutely chilling. And
Yeah.
with he can kill you with a look in this movie, and
Yeah, definitely.
that's one of the things that's so great about McGowan in this movie is Longshanks. And the thing that I love about one of the things I do truly love, and I talked about with regards to supporting actors, Mel Gibson is not just content telling the story of Will and Wallace. He is more interested in world building. Like this is a case where he is building out the politics of Scotland, the politics of England under Longshanks,
Yeah.
the politics of the common person in Scotland and what freedom should mean to the people of Scotland versus what it, the fact that it means something in theory, but a lot of people don't have, it's hard for them to really, because of all of the failures that Scotland has had over the years and trying to earn their freedom, they don't really have the stomach to for it. And a lot of it goes back to the politics in Scotland, the fact that they're basically under these particular lords who ultimately have fealty to Longshanks.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, like I was saying when I first watched it, I don't remember, but I probably didn't know that much about um, the United Kingdom and the different countries that are part of it, or which ones want freedom or not. So it's one of those things that when you watch the film, putting aside all the historical inaccuracies, but it lays the groundwork of telling you how were things politically, in terms of, you have this group of people, or this country that is uh, under the rule of this other country, and there are fights, and there are, struggles to gain independence, and, there are lords here and kings here, and that struggle and that fight, the film makes all that very clear. um so yeah, it's one of those things that, resonates with me, because, I'm from Puerto Rico. Most people know it. When most people know that Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. And I'm a very, very strong supporter of independence for Puerto Rico. It's one of those things that I'm very passionate about. So even at that point, when I was in my teens, that theme of Scotland's freedom, it's something that resonated with me. It's probably one of the reasons why I identified with the film. When William Wallace screams freedom in the end, it
Yeah.
always gets to me. It's one of those things that it's always, because, that scream of freedom is also my scream of freedom, because I would want my country to be free, to be
Mm-hmm.
independent, and not under the rule of, it's not the same situation, but uh, maybe it kind of is in some aspects, but we're not
I
going to
mean,
get into that.
it's fine. You guys really do not have as much representation in our country as you should, and I completely respect the fact that you want to be independent from the United States, especially
Yeah.
now.
Ah, oh God. Yeah. Cut the cord.
That's another story. We might touch on that later, but no, I mean the thing that is, you talked about the idea of freedom, and I appreciate you sharing that that personal resonance with the film, and I think, and it's funny rewatching it now with 30 years of perspective with regards to who Mel Gibson has kind of been as a filmmaker as well as an individual, and seeing kind of the directions that he has gone as an individual. And he
Mm.
is somebody who supports our current president, and who considers himself a dictator, and also is apparently one of the ambassadors to Hollywood for Trump, whatever exactly that means. I still am not completely sure what that means for him, but you know,
Even John
it's
Boyd.
it's yeah, and Sylvester Stallone. It's like
Yeah.
it almost makes me feel like Trump wants to take movies back to the 1980s, where it was just like military propaganda and action movie. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, never stopped being military propaganda. We'll talk about that in a different episode later on in the year. Spoiler alert, that discussion is coming. But No, the fact of the matter is, I do kind of feel like he wants to take it back to like the type of movies that were in the 1980s with, especially with those guys. It's we have to talk about Mel Gibson
Yeah.
as apart from a filmmaker who I personally still think he is a very talented filmmaker. I was not a
Yeah.
fan of Flight Risk, but I still think he's a very talented filmmaker just based on Man Without Face, based on Braveheart, based on Apocalypto, Hacksaw Ridge, and even his filmmaking in Passion of the Christ, whether or not his theology is worth discussing or not. I mean, I've talked with a frequent guest, Stuart Delany, about that back in 2018. And, now that they're apparently going ahead with two new movies in that
Yep.
inexplicable franchise, we may be talking about again, like I talked about in the Bad Faith episode of my Fascism in Cinema episode series. And I think that Gibson, and I do feel like Gibson is one of the most underrated screen presences and actors of that generation. I think if you look at movies like the first two Lethal Weapons, like Braveheart, like Men Without Face, and even Conspiracy Theory and Ransom, he has tremendous range as a film as an actor, and he can really deliver what you need out of a film.
Oh yeah, I agree. You know, I wouldn't even say that is underrated, um, because he was a big star at this point, and
Yeah,
and I think, but yeah, to your point, I think that a lot of people were banking more, on his action persona, um, but there are several things that he has, or he still has probably, but putting aside the fact that he turns out to be a terrible person, but he had first a charm that he uses it in this film, a certain charm that even when he was an action figure, there was this
yeah,
smile and this confidence and this magneticism to his characters that I think is unique and makes you gravitate to him as an actor. But the other thing that might go more to what you were trying to bring, I think he really uh, had a thing for dramatic moments and I can go as far as saying that I think there are few actors that could portray grief and pain as well as Mel Gibson, and that's
yeah,
something that you see here, after with several scenes, but with the death of Marin. That's something that you see in Ransom with the
hmm,
desperation for his son. That's something
yeah,
that you see in Lethal Weapon, especially in the first one when he's struggling
yeah,
with suicide. That's something that you see in The Patriot, in the scene where Heath Ledger dies. There's a he basically collapses and it's like he doesn't know what to do, and that scene has always stuck with me because I think it's
hmm,
a really powerful scene. um that's something that you can see in many of his other films. And The Man Without a Face I'm a big fan of that movie. I think I own the VHS as well, The Man Without a Face, because I'm a big fan of that one as well. um I think it was after Braveheart that I thought, let me check what else he has made, and I rented that. Um, but I think he has that ability to transmit grief and pain and suffering in signs is another good example. And I think he
yeah.
has that ability that not many actors have it as good as he do it as good as he does it.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, you brought up like some of my absolute favorite examples of his talent as an actor. Ransom. I mean, especially when it seems like his son has been killed. The scenes between he and Rene Russo are just absolutely
Yeah.
heartbreaking. And you mentioned the scene where he's contemplating suicide at the beginning of Lethal Weapon. Excellent example. And I mean, even when he loses what was her name? Vicky, or no, not Vicky. That was his wife.
Lethal Weapon
The
2? The
girl in
Patsy
Lethal
Kensit.
Weapon 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Häagen-Dazs.
Um, but yeah, and then obviously Signs, obviously The Patriot. And the thing is, it's like, granted, we're predominantly talking about movies before Passion of the Christ because obviously they were the ones that were the strongest part of the zeitgeist, and
Yeah.
it was still when he was one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood, and before he really got away from acting in mainstream movies and wanted to get more into directing, and then obviously with later events, and in terms of his DUI after as he was getting Apocalypto ready, where he put out anti where he was drunkenly spouting anti-Semitic bullshit, and obviously the domestic violence against his girlfriend at the time a few years later. And and then obviously, I mean, he and Caviezel was tied as thieves, and Jim Caviezel was basically QAnon pilled star, and it's part of the reason him going to full Q is part of the reason why I never watched Sound of Freedom. I might at some point. I might relinquish myself at that. I might do it at some point, but yeah, I that him there are so many reasons that movie turned me off for even before I had a chance to see it. But no, I mean, I will say there are a couple of excellent post passion movies of his where I think he's just gives fantastic performances. One was his last real starring vehicle for a major studio. That was Edge of Darkness,
Oh
which
yeah.
was directed by Martin Campbell, and then The Beaver, which was directed by Joey Foster.
Jodie Foster. Yeah.
I thought it was some of the best work of his career. I thought it was absolutely some of the best work of his career, and it almost did feel like he was really working out some shit. But I mean, we talked about it. He's basically in the tank for Trump. I think so much of it started after his divorce and the DUI and the divorce from his wife of 20 plus
Many
years.
years. Yeah.
And it basically got to a point where he just didn't give a shit anymore. And it's like, I don't care how people look at me. And it's like,
Yeah.
people are going to look at, and, I mean, the, this is part of where it's, it's very complicated to talk about Gibson. And I wanted to talk about this. Wanted to talk about this movie because I love this movie. I wanted to talk about Gibson because it's always been one of the most complicated balancing acts for me of, can I still watch this person's work even though I think the person themselves is trash, and I have no respect for the person whatsoever. Before Passion of the Christ, I can definitely say that. I mean, I've watched a number of his films over the years, like the Lethal Weapon movies. Basically, all of his Donner collaborations hold up. Patriot, it's been a while since I've seen that, but I'm pretty sure that holds up. Signs holds up amazingly well. I mean, he's at that point before Passion of the Christ. I think a lot of that kind of holds up. I haven't watched What Women Want in a while. I'm not sure if that one would hold up quite as well. But but yeah, I mean, and and the thing with the Mad Max movies, especially, it's like it's a lot of that is driven by George Miller and his
Yeah.
filmmaking. Um, I mean, you kind of gave us hints on your feelings about Gibson earlier outside of his work. Where do you stand on him as far as outside of the filmmaking?
I'm more or less on the same page as you. I think uh, it's that question of can I separate the art from the artist? And I think that for the most part, I can do that. Most cases. Um, and certainly I can enjoy some of his old work, and I really enjoyed rewatching Braveheart, which it had been a while since
Yeah,
I last seen it, and I definitely enjoyed revisiting it. Um, I enjoy all the previous films. The films that have come afterwards, I haven't seen that much, to be honest, for different reasons. Probably because most of them have been straight to video
yeah.
crap, and you know. Um, but for example, I was looking at his filmography, and I've seen The Expendables 3, where he plays a bad guy, which
Yeah.
is kind of a niche that he has gone probably because of the persona or what people see in him right now. He has played a lot of bad
I
guys.
I think it was a good I think it was smart of Stallone, who I mean that's basically his baby as far as a
Yeah,
franchise. I think it was smart of Stallone to cast Gibson that way. And I
I
mean,
agree.
yeah, I think so too. I think the last film, I mean, not including Hacksaw Ridge because in Flight Risk because he just directed those, he didn't star in those. I think the well, when did Expendables 3 come out? That was like 13 or 14?
14.
Okay. So that would have been the last film of Gibson's that I'd seen in theaters where he's on screen. I
Yeah,
did watch one of his, it's funny. I had a chance to watch a screener link of one of his straight to VOD releases a few years ago, Panama, and it's like it did nothing for me. Like it was like, yeah, I'm over it. I don't need to see any of these. I
yeah,
just don't see.
yeah.
And I mean, the thing is, it's like I know he's since Donner's passed away in 21. I know he's talked about, oh, Donner wanted me to direct Lethal Weapon 5, and it's like I there are just too many of the. I don't want to. First of all, I think the way Lethal Weapon 4 ended is the
Perfect. Yeah,
way that franchise should end.
yeah,
But I like Gibson is not the same type of filmmaker Donner is, and I think he's a very good filmmaker when he gets a chance. But I just don't see that. I don't see. I don't see me vibing with a Mel Gibson directed Lethal Weapon 5 the same way I would with a Richard Donner directed it. And he
yeah.
especially with the way Gibson's off-screen persona is now. Like I just can't see him getting back into that role and me believing it.
Yeah, and Danny Glover is how old? I think Danny Glover he's definitely too old for that shit now.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't know. I don't think, like I said, it was Lethal Weapon 4. It was perfect. It ended with all the people involved, from Donner down to the chief and everybody else.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that should be it. So I don't know. I really don't know. I did want to bring another one that I think is the only other one that I've seen afterwards, and it's Fat Man. I don't know if you've seen it, which is
I was curious about it, but I never got around to seeing it.
it was an interesting one, and he does a really good job. It's sort of like a bit of an alternate look to Santa Claus. He's
Yeah.
Santa Claus, and he's fighting against this like a hitman that is played by the great Walton Goggins, who I adore. Um, and it definitely is a really fun uh, film with a lot of dark humor, but Gibson does go to those emotional places, and I think he does a pretty good job with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean admittedly there are a couple in like the past decade or so where whenever I see them on a streaming site, I'm always like, maybe I'll catch it at some point. Like that one's one of them. Um, Professor and the Madman was another one, but I know that
Yeah,
had tumultuous production with that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was and I'll never forget a few years ago, like there were rumors that he was going to be a movie called Rothschilds or something like that, and it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? I mean, why is this even something we're contemplating? It never got off the ground, but it's like seriously, with his anti-Semitic past, what are we even talking about here? It's like seriously, whatever. Um, but no, I mean it's and I think my mom's last real hurrah with Gibson was watching Passion of the Christ, and that whole lead up to he really started to lean into his ultra conservative Catholicism in the lead up to, and she watched it and she's like, okay. And I mean, I think there were only a couple of other movies of his that got her to um after that, but I mean she was done. She kind of moved on. And I mean it's not hard to see why. It's like you look at especially in that era, it felt like the PR persona of him that he had been able to cultivate over the previous 25 years or so, from Mad Max to Passion of the Christ, was gradually wearing off. And I mean, obviously the DUI and the divorce did irreparable damage to him, and then the domestic violence later and all of that. And I mean, granted, yes, he did get Oscar nominated for directing Hacksaw Ridge,
yeah,
but the fact of the matter is, I mean, he's that's the last movie he's really done for that got a significant theatrical release outside of other than Flight Risk, which was a January dump release.
yeah,
And it's not that good. It's like, it's funny because of the fact that I watched Flight Risk. I watched Flight Risk out of sheer curiosity, just because I do like Gibson as a director, and I was curious what he would do with a premise like that. And the thing that I found is that, like, it's if you if I didn't know that Mel Gibson was the director of that movie, I would not have known that Gibson directed that movie.
yeah. I suppose I haven't seen it, but it looks like the kind of studio mandated film.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, let's get whoever. Oh, we can get Mel Gibson. Okay, here it is. Do your thing, and that's it. Um, so it looks like the kind of thing that has no auteur flair, so to
yeah.
speak.
No, I mean, I can kind of see I can kind of see the pull with it because it's he and Wahlberg have this collaboration going, which it's like, okay.
They were on
But
Daddy's Home
also
together.
it's
Yeah,
so isolated to like one location, which is the plane, and it's like, okay, I can see you being interested in the challenge of how you're gonna shoot that and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, you would just not know it whatsoever that it was directed by the same person who did Braveheart or Apocalypto even. Um, but I do want to bring it back to Braveheart because there's still a lot that I want to talk about. I love that I love that Robert the Bruce is the one who narrates this story. I love that that is before we even meet him on screen. I love that we he's the one who is telling the story, and it is the thing about Angus McFadden's role. And if you haven't seen it, in 2019 there was kind of a sort of legacy sequel, if you will.
Yeah,
McFadden
I was gonna
starred
bring
in
that
it
up. Yeah.
with Robert, called Robert the Bruce. It's not a bad movie. I mean, it's not great, but it's a decent movie, especially if you want to see him in the role again. The thing that I find so one of the things I find so interesting about the Bruce in this is the fact that I feel like to a certain extent he is as optimistic about the idea of freedom and genuine about his desire to have Scotland be free as Wallace is, but because he's so entrenched in the politics of Scotland, he can't show it the same way that William shows, and he and that's something that he very much envies in Wallace.
Yeah, I have two big issues with the film, and the character of Robert the Bruce is one of the things that I struggle with because I like Angus McFadden, some of what he tries to bring, but I think there's a lot of script issues here or how the character is written, um, and overall, I think that the character or what they get across is a bit of a mess. Um, and not necessarily from a historical point of view, but in terms from the story that we do get in the film. And it's, I think they wanted to portray him as ambiguous and doubtful and insecure, but he comes off more as an opportunistic, weak-minded prick.
Yeah,
Um, it's you get this scene where he swears with Wallace, I'm going to unite the clans, and the next scene he betrays him in the battlefield. So it's kind of, I think that there needed to be some space there, but to have those two things, and then then there's like a bit of a scene, and then in the other he again swears to yeah, we're getting together and whatever, and then they betray him, and this time he isn't the one that betrays him, but he is there. um and I think that this maybe the scenes should have been spaced a bit so it didn't feel like, I'm going to unite the clans, but I'm going to betray you right afterwards.
yeah,
And I think that the whole way that the scene and the battlefield is built up is uh awkward. They have him with this helmet that you can see his face, and so
yeah,
you don't know, it's all built up for the reveal when he pulls. But there's, I don't know, it's like, I see that it's, I lift the helmet and I see him, and then okay, but I'm gonna save him, and it's all a bit of a mess. And this
yeah,
struggle with his father, um, which I think there was material there to have something really powerful between them, and the scenes are powerful between them. There is something there, um, but it's just, I think that it's just, um, I don't know if to say suffocated by how the script handles those characters. But it's one of my uh, main issues with the film.
I think that's fair. Because he is often seen as more of a pawn in the political machinations of the story than somebody who's actually taking charge in the story. And I mean, you brought up the fact that he twice gives Wallace his word that I want to work with you. I want to be somebody who collaborates with you to bring freedom to Scotland. And then, yeah, you're right. The second time, he's not the one who necessarily betrays Wallace, but he's used in a way that betrays betrays Wallace.
And
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 yeah,
one of the things
I
that's
think that's fair.
I don't think it's one of the things that I think it boils down for me in the end, where he's supposed to, uh, like uh, uh, recognize the English lord in the final scene, and he decides, to rally against them instead. With what we've seen from Robert the Bruce, I don't think that people like Hamish and Stephen
Yeah.
would rally behind him. It's the kind
No,
of thing that, based
I
on what we've seen, I would be
yeah.
like, I don't know what you're what you're going to do.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Um, no, you're right. And I mean, it's funny because of the fact that one of the, and we can talk about it. I mean, we talked about Longshanks a lot earlier in the movie. Um, One of the things that really doesn't age well in this movie is the very distinct homophobia
Ah, yeah,
in the way it portrays his son and his
yeah,
son's lover. I mean, and obviously the way the Philip is dispatched in the movie, which is funny because if you asked me in '95, I would have been like, well, that's more. I feel like that more points to the cruelty of Longshanks than just being an overly homophobic action. Um,
yeah,
but at the same time, you think about it, it's like, well, it did honestly did more often than not elicit laughs in theaters, and it's one of those things where it's like, especially the more distance you get away from that initial reaction, it's like, okay, yeah, I do kind of, yeah, this is well, and it's more with his son, where it's like his son's just completely weak and effete, and just he's not going to, and his wife has more power than he does.
yeah. And there's this whole thing about how they are always, paying attention to how they're dressed, and have to put the belt over here and over
Yeah,
there, and all that kind of thing. And then obviously the whole, um, uh, uh, not only the wardrobe, but the whole way that his whole physique, and
yeah,
it's going for that vibe. About the murder of Philip, uh, I think it was. I don't know. I don't know if it was McGuhan himself or somebody else who said something to that, uh, to kind of like what you said. This is just him being cruel. Doesn't have to do
yeah,
with him being uh, any homophobia. But yeah, it's there. It's something that it's there, and obviously you can get that. Um, but it's one of those things that yeah, and when you go to history, we've already touched on how historical inaccuracy, but this is completely made up, but it's yeah, it's in a way, I think it's building up. It makes for some great moments from Longshanks, because I love the scene where he's where he says where he's just talking to himself, going like, who am I going to send to
yeah,
my the mere sight of my son will make them invade England. And
yeah,
so there are some moments that they play with that, where it goes to that cruelty and that villainy that I
mhm,
like. But I think it builds up to what is my other main issue with the film. And I think, based on what I read about you, I think you agree with me. And it's the thing that I think the whole relationship between Wallace and Isabel is completely unnecessary. I don't
mhm,
think it needed to be there, and I think it even harms or tarnishes Wallace, this whole vow or burden that he has with Murn.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I don't think. you really needed to. I mean, you could have Isabel smitten by him and whatnot. Um, uh, I love the scene where where he plays with the language, and this is
Yeah.
savage. This that is a great scene. Um, but I don't think we needed that. And I think the portrayal of the of how the prince is portrayed, it goes with hand in hand with that, that Isabel uh, doesn't have a husband, so to speak, but
Yeah.
but she has William Wallace, or she had him.
Well,
Um,
and it's basically a final dagger to Volley de
Longshanks,
Longshanks. The
right?
idea that, Wallace might have gotten her pregnant when her husband
Yeah,
never would. But no, I do agree with you on the relationship between Isabella and Wallace. I do think it unbounces the idea that so much of what Wallace is doing this for is for Murren
yeah,
and for the relationship that he lost when she was killed. Um, and I think you could have done a lot of the same story beats without having that romantic aspect to his and Isabella's relationship. I think the
yeah,
fact that I think if you look at it as she resents her father-in-law so much that she's willing to help him. That's motivation. That is motivation enough
yeah,
for that is motivation enough for her to help Wallace. And I think that would have been a more impactful way of bring that part of the story to life than just just having a gratuitous romantic scene. But I mean,
yeah,
it's also it's also it goes kind of with the myth making of this movie where it's like obviously that didn't happen in real life, that was complete
yeah,
fabrication,
yeah,
but it's like the idea of this commoner from Scotland having such a hold on the Princess of England. It's like that just adds to the myth. And you talked about that great montage near the end where it was after he kills a couple of the lords that betrayed him at
yeah,
Falkirk, and you basically see the commoners just building his legend off more and more, and it's a fantastic montage. um the structure of this film it's funny because this does not feel like a 3 hour movie. Like this movie moves like a bullet.
yeah,
But the thing that I'm so fascinated by is that the 3 act structure it follows is you would naturally think like, oh, the first hours for Act One, second hours Act Two, hours Act Three. It really kind of isn't deliberately broken down. I think it's like the first 45 minutes. Basically when he attacks the garrison after Murn is killed
yeah.
is where we that's essentially the beginning of Act Two.
Yeah, I agree.
And the end of Act Two's the betrayal of Falkirk, which leads to everything else that happens in the movie. And the fact that structurally speaking, it follows so many of the basic tenets of that type of story, but doesn't necessarily follow the basic structure of that story, I think is really fascinating. And it really points to Gibson as a very talented storyteller, cinematic storyteller, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a typical, like I said, this is a typical rise of the hero, and and then you have that climax and that fall in the end. So I think it follows. Yeah, it gives you that clear structure, and it's something that we've seen him do in his other films. For example, you get Apocalypto. In Apocalypto, you get this first act before or up to the point where the village is attacked, but then you get this journey, and then you have this part where he finally escapes, and then what happens towards the end as he tries to rescue. So there's that uh very deliberate three-act structure that I think they both Gibson and Wallace managed to get across quite well. And to your point, I do agree. It's 3 hours, but like I was telling you, it didn't feel like 3 hours. I mean, I watched it yesterday, and I'm at a point where I struggle with 1 hour, 1 hour and a half films,
Yeah.
where I fall asleep. Where I'm old, so yeah, I fall asleep, and it didn't happen with this one. I started earlier. I saw like maybe like that first act earlier in the day, and then I finished the next 2 hours, 2 hours ish at night, and I was, which is weird because it's a film that I've seen a dozen times, but I was completely involved in it and captivated by it, and uh, it really goes to that storytelling ability from them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Um, let's see. I think a big part of one of the things I do really like about this movie, and I mean, is and one of the things that I think this benefits having an actor like Gibson directing somebody who's really known for action comedies is he was able to bring a lot of humor to this movie. And I think the way it plays out, you talk, and I mean the David O'Hara as Stephen is a great foil for him, and he comes off as this mad Irishman and stuff like that, but he also becomes one of Wallace's most trusted
Yeah,
lieutenants. And there's a lot of very kind of absurd humor in the movie and very silly humor. I mean, I love the reintroduction of Wallace to Hamish at the
yeah,
wedding
yeah,
and throwing the rocks and all that stuff, and that deep down they kind of know who one another is, but they're just kind of testing each other after so many years. And no, it's absolutely I think he does a very good job with that. And again, it boils down to the fact that this is about making a myth. This isn't about telling history.
yeah. And I think, to that point, I think that one of the things that I enjoy the most is that how the Gibson and the script, they managed to build this chemistry, this great chemistry between this core characters, between the Scots. You get Hamish, you get Stephen comes later, but you get Tommy Flanagan, which I was mentioning. He's there for
Yeah,
for a good run. Hamish's father. So there are a couple of characters, like four or five characters, and you get a great chemistry between them. There are some good banter between Hamish and his father, and
yeah,
that I really enjoy. And that's part of what makes it feel so um, breezy, perhaps, or that humor which you mentioned, and it makes it all. It's not comedy heavy, but it makes it feel more real, more honest, more fun.
yeah,
Um, Among all the carnage that you're gonna watch in other parts, but it's something that I enjoy.
yeah. No, and I mean, you mentioned Hamish and his father. It's like one of the, you know, we see the building of that bond and that relationship, and they have these silly moments like when they're trying to get the arrow out of him after
Yeah,
after the first fight with the Garrison, and he's like, here, you
you
do
hold
it.
him. I'm
I'll
gonna hold
hold him
him.
down. I'll do it. But then you also have his father's death later on, and
Yeah,
it's very emotional because of the fact that you've come to care about these characters so
yeah.
much. Um,
It's earned. It's earned.
and talking about going to Murrin to a certain extent. Catherine McCormick does a lovely job in her
Yeah,
brief moments and early on in the film, and you really do get that bond. And one of the things that I like is that you realize you understand the motivations of her parents in wanting to keep them separate, because and why he doesn't immediately trust Wallace with his daughter. And then you have the moment of tension at the funeral
oh yeah.
where it's like, what is he going to do to William Wallace now
I
that
love
his
that.
their actions, their action, his actions essentially got her killed. And it's a brief moment of tension, but then you also see him at the end of the movie. He's standing side by side with Hamish, with Steven. So he's you know it's almost like he's accepted that William Wallace was that William was somebody who was just trying to
Yeah,
do right by everybody.
that essentially uh, Moran's death is not on was.
Yeah,
This wasn't his fault. And you know what? One thing that I think it goes to the skill of Gibson. There's not a time that I watched the Moran death scene that I keep hoping that William comes in the horizon. It's so heartbreaking and so uh, perfectly built. The way that she's captured and you keep and I know what's gonna happen. Obviously,
yeah.
but I keep hoping that when she looks to the horizon, he's gonna come up and save her. Oh, it's I oh, it breaks my heart.
The way he builds that scene is just absolutely fantastic. And you brought up the fact that her looking over the horizon and stuff like that, trying to see him, and there's so much that is communicated. She does such a great job in that moment. Like, you can see the anxiety in her eyes. Like, she acts that so incredibly well. And no, it goes back to the fact that he does a fantastic job of just building out the world of this movie, of this character. It's not just a straight A to B to C hero's journey.
Yeah.
There's so much more to this, and it's amazing. It really is a movie that like with you, it'd been a few years since I'd seen it, and when I watched it for this episode, and um, it still gets me. It still gets me. It's like, yes, I have intellectually, I have my thoughts on Gibson now, and how I how he's squandered some of the strong some of the biggest goodwill any actor I think has ever squandered
Yeah.
over the years with his bigotry and just his poor choices. But at the same time, it's like I watch this film and it's like he is such a strong filmmaker. And it's like, you know, even I mean, even regardless of where you sit on Passion of the Christ in terms of theology, as filmmaking, there's something about that film that is just it's it's wholly unique what he's able to do in that film, and it's wholly captivating what he does in that film. Even though the more you learn about him, the more you learn about his inspirations for that film, it's like, okay, yeah, I he people were right to question to look at the potential for anti-Semitism in this film.
It's been a while since I've seen Passion of the Christ, but I I can say, um, at the time I saw it, I was in church. I was heavy into church. I grew up and was raised in a Protestant church. And I remember at the time I was already in my 20s and I was a leader in the church. Um, and I remember, and it's one of the things that I can say one of the good things. I can say a lot of good things about the church I used to go to. Um, but they took us to see the movie. Like
Hmm.
they bought a lot of tickets and they took all of us to see the movie, and then we went to another church. We had lunch, and we sat down. We all talked about the movie. Um, there was several pastors that were like hosted like a Q&A, and we talk about it. And I think that's good. Have
Yeah.
conversations about what we're seeing, whether we agree or disagree or not. I remember I loved the movie. I think I saw it once afterwards, but I haven't seen it in a long time. I'm not as much to church anymore. Um, uh, but I will have to see it again to see how it fares now. But as far regardless of the like you said, the theology or whatnot, I think that as a film, as a spectacle in certain aspects, I think it succeeds, and he shows his skills as a filmmaker, as in creating moments and directing and whatnot. So I think he does succeed in that. Um, but it's one that again I haven't seen in probably
Yeah.
20 years. So maybe I should give it a shot again to see. Maybe when the next one comes.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like I know even when my friend Stuart and I talked about it on in 2018, there had been talk by then that, oh yeah, they're gonna work on doing a second one. It'll be called Resurrection, Passion of the Christ. And I asked Stuart, who's more theologically aware than I am, like what is even that going to look like? What is that going to be about? I mean, okay. And even he was like, he had some ideas. He can go back to that episode and listen. Um, but no, my morbid curiosity, just because of the fact that how much I do admire Gibson as a filmmaker, and my morbid curiosity about what on earth a follow-up to that movie could possibly look like. I mean, I will definitely see it. It's funny because of the fact that that movie is one of the early movies that really kind of kick-started the ways in which like religiously themed movies get promoted and get
Yeah.
marketed to the faithful. And we talked about it, I think, a little bit in that episode. We've talked about in other episodes. And yeah, it's gonna be interesting to I'm curious what that's going to be like. I just can't see it being I just because of the fact that Gibson's like overall. image is just so tarnished at this point. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that's going to be as nearly as successful as the first one was, but we'll see. Did you have anything more that you wanted to touch on with regards to Braveheart?
No, just quickly touch on that, but I'm seeing, and it's written. The screenplay is written by Mel Gibson and Randall Wallace. Um, the Resurrection of the Christ,
Yeah,
and yeah, like I said, it's gonna be weird. A lot of the same people are involved: Jim Caviezel, Monica Bellucci, and Maya Morgenstern, who play Mary. Um, so it's gonna be weird to see that film uh, more than 20 years afterwards.
yeah,
I don't know how they're gonna play with that, but yeah. As for Braveheart, um, I think I pretty much summed up how I feel. I think that um, it's I said it when we started talking. I think it's a perfect spectacle of a film. I think that Gibson succeeds in creating this. I don't want to say crowd pleasing because it's not necessary crowd pleasing, but this perfect blockbuster of a film
yeah,
with characters that are like William Wallace and like you said, larger than life, and characters that are I feel likable in terms of his friends and bad guys. You know, a clear line between good and bad with Longshanks in the other side. I might have issues, like I said, with the gray area, which I can say is maybe Robert the Bruce. But it's probably my dad and the Isabel issues are probably my only two issues with the film. Other than that, I think it's a great film that holds up really well. The battle scenes which you mentioned are perfect, and I think it's one that has stood the test of time.
yeah. And I would be remiss, obviously, if I didn't mention the amazing cinematography by John Toll.
John Toll, yeah,
This was his second Oscar in a row. He had won the previous year for Legends of the Fall, which was another film scored by James Horner, actually. And yeah, I mean, no, there's not much else that I wanted to say about the film. It is I think you summed it up perfectly. It is just a perfect spectacle. It's myth making, it's filmmaking on
yeah,
a level that I think we're very fortunate to get because not all big historical epics that we get work on this type of level.
yeah.
And are able to feel as fleshed out on this type of level as they are, as this one is. And Carlo, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Where can I know you said that Movie Lou's on a bit of a hiatus right now, but where can people find you online?
Well, like you said, we're on a hiatus, but you can still find our old episodes. We have more than 100 episodes available wherever you listen to podcasts. You can just look for the Movie Loot. We have various different types of episodes. You where Brian was on one or two did we do a loot?
Yeah,
We did the silent loot,
we
but
did the Silent Loot, and then we did another one. I think it was early last year.
yeah, where we pick movies are
Yeah,
yeah, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so you can hear Brian on a couple of those if you search. You can find me on social media. I'm still on Twitter at ThiefCGT, ThiefCGT. I'm on Blue Sky, same name, ThiefCGT. Um, and there's an Instagram around there, even though I don't use it a lot, but yeah, Twitter and Blue Sky is where I'm most active, and you can find me and love talking movies, whatever. So yeah, that's where people can find me. And if you listen to the movie loot, just hold on to it, and we'll definitely get back at some point.
Yeah, and I've loved talking to Carlo over the years. I think this is his fourth time being on the podcast actually, because we had the first one where we talked about documentaries, then we talked about The
Godfather.
Godfather, and then we talked about the game. So yeah,
Yeah.
this is the fourth time we've had you on, and I definitely look forward to talking to you more in the future. So thank you very
And
much for joining me.
no, definitely. Anytime you need me, you just have to let me know.
Yeah. I want to thank Carlo for joining me on the podcast. It is always a pleasure to talk to him. That's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema podcast. Uh, Not really doing. I know October tends to be the month of horror for me on the podcast, because of the way episodes have gone in terms of the way they've kind of been backed up. We're not really touching on horror. We're talking a little bit about horror uh, later on in the later on in the month, but it doesn't necessarily uh, hit the same specific horror beats that I'm used to. But we're going to be going in a direction similar to what we did a couple of years ago with Dracula, with another venerable piece of fiction and how it's been adapted over the years. And so that's going to be it for this episode of the podcast. Coming up, we're going to have a couple of episodes of fascism and cinema, as that series seems to get more and more relevant in the present United States, as well as some return guests talking about some favorite movies. Thank you very much for joining me as always. Check out Carlo in the movie Loot. Even if he doesn't have new episodes, check out his old ones. He's got some great ones there, and with some great guests. And check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Good Pods, and also check out the Patreon. But first and foremost, check us out and continue to check us out at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.